I am the director of the Psychological and Related Services Department. We have approximately 100 school psychologists in the department, as well as a couple of diagnosticians, and also included in our department are the occupational therapists, physical therapists, music therapists, and counseling as a related service therapist. The FIE, or full individual evaluation, is an initial assessment when we suspect a student may have a disability. And so the purpose of the FIE is to evaluate across all areas. Some just may be informal, some will be formal, to determine if the areas of suspected disability are significant to where disability is met. From that point, an ART is held to determine if they're eligible for special education. So the FIE basically sets the stage for if criteria are met that would show that a student needs additional support and services. So there are sections in every evaluation that have to be covered, like I said a minute ago, either formally or informally, depending on what the suspected area of concern is. The first area that we look at is communication, which looks at the student's home language, their academic language, what their language of dominance is, communication skills in the classroom, how that overall language and communication is developing. So that may be informal if there aren't speech concerns per se. If there are speech and language concerns, that would be a more formal assessment conducted by a speech language pathologist. Next area would be health history. So not only developmentally, birth history, things like that, but also are there any significant medical or physical concerns that may be impacting the student's performance in the classroom. Vision, hearing, all of those are part of that area. And then motor ability is kind of tied to that. Gross motor, fine motor, where occupational therapist, physical therapist, if needed, would be involved in that if that's an area that is of concern. Typically, throughout all these areas, if it's not an area of suspected disability, it will be noted in the evaluation milestones were achieved developmentally appropriate, did not demonstrate any deficits or concerns on the part of the parent or campus or school in this area. So it's whether, and if it is a concern, then that's where we get into the more formalized assessment. Sociological would be the next area covered in the evaluation, and that looks at attendance, any sort of home or domestic components that could be impacting the student's performance at the school. Any significant changes, if it's a student that has moved frequently and periodically, that would be noted because that could obviously impact their instructional history pattern. Next area is emotional behavioral, which looks at their overall behavior and emotional functioning in the classroom. Are they, how do they get along with peers? How do they interact verbally, non-verbally, socially? Are they developmentally appropriate in their interactions? Do they have difficulties maintaining friendships? Do they struggle to effectively interact with their peers, with their teachers, those kinds of things? Intellectual and adaptive behavior looks at their overall cognitive functioning, as well as many elements of cognition. The adaptive behavior looks at different things like communication development, social development, self-care, those kinds of things. When you're looking at maybe an intellectual disability, the adaptive behavior is a significant component that we have to formally assess as well, because if you're having deficits cognitively as well as adaptively, then that maybe sets the stage for criteria being met for an intellectual disability. Academic performance, we look at a lot of things informally, such as their academic history, STAR tests, benchmark tests, those kinds of things, as well as any updated or formal achievement assessment that the school psychologist may do. We look at a number of areas for academics. We look at math reasoning, math calculation, reading fluency, reading comprehension, basic reading skills, written expression, as well as listening comprehension, oral expression, are the areas that we would formally cover in an evaluation. And then assistive technology is also another one that the speech and language pathologist kind of participates in, and it looks like any sort of technology that a student may need in the classroom to more effectively access their instructional program. My recommendation is the FIE as a whole, because you're going to want to know where their strengths are. And by knowing where their strengths are, that can help a teacher have a bigger impact on how they're working with the child. Because if there are certain areas of where they're maybe, let's say they don't have a specific learning disability, but they do have some cognitive strengths and some cognitive weaknesses, you're going to want to know what those strengths are, so that maybe that's a better way to program for that student based on what the needs might be. So at least a familiarity with all elements of it, and then the energy can be put mainly from that point towards what are we trying to target, what are we trying to address. And that's something that we as a department are trying to be a bit more robust with going forward. We used to be fairly general in our recommendations, general recommendation for accommodations in the classroom, things like that. So what we're trying to do a better job of for teachers that are instructing these students every day, are what are some specific areas in the area of reading or in the area of math that need support, and strategies and ideas on how to support those. Maybe some real specific, direct things that can be done on a daily basis, in addition to the general modification or accommodation recommendations. The LSSP on the campus, the school psychologist, they will be your experts in kind of going through that. I can guarantee you that we would welcome those conversations. We would much rather teachers be comfortable and familiar with that information than fearful of it or anxious about it or just unaware of it. And so we would love and always welcome a sit-down conversation from a teacher that's wanting to understand it better. Your school psychologist at the campus, and every campus has one, would be more than willing to sit down and review that.